The sound had become a permanent fixture in the camp, like the crackling buzz of malfunctioning solar panels or the suspicious sizzle from the food dispensers. It wasn't a normal cry, not the whimper of a hungry child, not the wail of pain or fear. It was a cry that reverberated, a sound wave engineered by some unkind god to penetrate helmets, drill through eardrums, and burrow into the squishy, sleepless hearts of all sentient life forms. Sergeant Elias Vaughan leaned back against a crate of thermal blankets, chewing on a ration bar that claimed to be beef-flavored, but tasted more like betrayal and regret. The baby's cry cut through the air again. The sound made a passing Grelth soldier, a hardened insectoid with 6 combat scars and no known emotions, shudder and whisper something that sounded suspiciously like a prayer. "Still going," Elias muttered, not to anyone in particular. The squad's AI, Harv E, pinged politely in his ear. Estimated continuous crying duration, 61 hours, 42 minutes, and "Thank you, Harvey. You've been a ray of absolute misery." "You're welcome, Sergeant." The child belonged to a Tarsheen woman stationed in the far quadrant of the refugee camp. Most people avoided her tent now, which hummed faintly with psionic residue and reeked of despair-flavored baby formula. She rarely left, cradling her child in arms that glowed faintly in the dark, as all Tarsheen did. Every now and then, someone tried to help. A well-meaning nurse, a grumpy botanist with natural sedatives. One idiot even brought a holographic mobile that played Terran lullabies. The mobile exploded. Elias tossed the rest of his ration bar into the waste unit and stood. He wasn't a hero, he wasn't a doctor, and he sure as hell wasn't a babysitter. But there was something about the pitch of that cry, something that made the hair on his arms rise in quiet protest. "You going in there?" Private Dree asked from the shadows, eyes wide. "Yeah, figure I'll either help or explode. Maybe both. Keep a mop handy." The tent was dim inside, lit only by the soft, bioluminescent swirl of the Tarsheen mother's skin. She looked up as Elias entered, her eyes hollow and glowing gold, holding the writhing bundle of misery in her arms. The baby had tiny antennae, trembling like they were tuning into the frequency of universal doom. "I'm not here to poke or prod," Elias said, holding up both hands. "I'm just trying something different." The baby stopped. It was like the universe pressed pause. The silence was immediate, and so shocking, Elias actually checked to make sure the child hadn't died. But no, the kid was staring up at him, big alien eyes locked onto his face, antennae now trembling in what could only be described as fascination. Then impossibly a small gurgle, almost a laugh. The Tarsheen woman blinked at him. How did you do that?" "I don't know," Elias said, carefully lowering himself onto a storage crate. "Maybe I smell like failure. Babies love that." She didn't laugh, but her shoulders dropped just slightly. The baby cooed again, and Elias gave it a tentative finger to hold. Tiny suction cup fingers latched on with surprising strength. "He's never done that," she whispered. "Never stopped. Never looked at someone like that." Elias shrugged. "Well, I'm kind of a big deal among small screaming life forms. My niece once projectile vomited into my ear and then took her first steps chasing me with a plastic sword, bonding through chaos." The baby's eyes didn't leave him, nor did his grip. Harvey pinged again. "Sergeant, local psionic readings are fluctuating." "Yeah," Elias muttered. "So's my blood pressure." He looked at the baby, at the calm settling into the tent like a cautious truce. Something in his chest tightened, not in a painful way. Not yet, but in a way he hadn't felt in years, like a thread pulling taut. The mother leaned forward. "What are you?" Elias glanced down at the tiny alien fingers, still latched to his glove, and forced a grin. "Mostly human. Some sarcasm, a bit of stubborn. The rest? I guess we'll find out." The next morning, Elias woke up with a foot in his face and something suspiciously gooey on his left boot. It took him a moment to remember where he was. Inside the Tarsheen tent, curled up on a deflated med cushion, the alien baby still snoozing beside him like a smug, psionically gifted tick. Lucia, the mother, was sitting quietly nearby, braiding strands of glowing thread from her hair into a loose coil. I think your kid drooled psionic jelly on my boot, Elias mumbled, squinting at the smear. Any chance that's corrosive? Only to pride, Lucia said without looking up. Too late, then. He wiggled his foot experimentally. The boot let out a soft whine, possibly emotional, possibly hydraulic. It's weirdly soothing. I might market this as spa therapy. Lucia didn't laugh, but one of her shoulders twitched in a way that Elias was starting to interpret as Tarshin 4. I am not entirely annoyed by your existence. Progress. The baby, who had yet to receive a proper name from Elias but was currently going by Captain Scream in his internal monologue, stirred and made a warbling noise. Elias instinctively reached out, and the moment his fingers grazed the soft patch between the tiny antennae, the baby sighed like a miniature Zen monk and promptly fell back asleep. See that? Elias grinned. It's the touch. I'm basically the baby whisperer, just for aliens. You are not a whisperer, Lucia said slowly, as if trying out the words in a language she barely believed. You are a resonance. I don't understand it, but he does. He meaning the kid, or some mysterious energy being who's decided to bless me with pacifier magic? Elias asked. Yes. He stared at her. Right. Comforting. Later, after an attempt at breakfast that involved rehydrated something and a mug of what Elias could only describe as liquid regret, the camp's perimeter alarm let out a short blip. Nothing serious, just the usual, a drone saw a bird and panicked sort of thing. Still, it drew enough attention that one of the med officers from command strolled over to investigate the tent. Her name was Dr. Ilari Threx, and she looked exactly like someone who hadn't slept in a decade and blamed Elias personally. I heard the crying stopped, she said, peering at the baby like it might explode at any second. Did you sedate it? I hugged it, Elias said. Sedation via physical contact is not... I hugged it. Ilari sighed, adjusted her scanning visor, and aimed it at the kid. A soft hum filled the tent. Then after a moment, she frowned. There's something odd. Define odd. His brainwaves, they're syncing. With yours. Elias blinked. You mean like friends? No, she snapped. I mean like two instruments on the same frequency. The kind of frequency that breaks glass or causes ships to lose nav control during warp jumps. This isn't bonding, Sergeant. This is resonance. Lucia made a low sound. Tar sheen for I told you so, silly human. Ilari continued, tapping at her holopad. I need to run a full genetic panel. On you, the mother, and the child. I'm not giving anyone blood unless they offer coffee in exchange, Elias said. Preferably coffee that doesn't bite back. We have a protocol. Lady, the last protocol involved me being reassigned to a moon that exploded twice in the same week. Your protocols can take a number. The baby giggled. Ilari froze. Did it just laugh? It did, Elias said proudly. Probably at me, which frankly I respect. The doctor scowled and stalked out, mumbling something about xenogenetic anomalies, and why do I always get the cursed ones? Elias turned back to Lucia. So, now what? She looked down at her son, now dozing, arms curled around Elias's discarded glove, and then up at the soldier who had wandered into her world with bad jokes and warm hands. Now, she said, voice quiet but certain, you stay. Elias sighed, stretched his back, and eyed the goo-stained boot with suspicion. Well, he said, guess I'm officially a babysitter for the apocalypse. They came for him before breakfast, which was a shame because Elias had just managed to negotiate a rare victory. An extra sachet of sweetener from the quartermaster, smuggled into his mug of burnt synth coffee like a treasure from the ancient world. Sergeant Vorn, said a voice behind him, sharp, clipped, and echoing with the emotional warmth of an orbital minefield. You are required at Central Command, immediately. Elias sipped his coffee slowly. Unless immediately comes with a breakfast upgrade, I'll need 5 more minutes and a food substitute that doesn't resemble compressed fungus. The officer didn't smile. They never did. Bureaucrats train their faces to achieve full emotional detachment by their second internship. This one wore a Navy uniform so crisp it might have been weaponized. Her nameplate read Tagrin, and her expression read, "I will report you to 6 departments if you breathe wrong." Elias stood with a groan, cradling his coffee like it was the last friend he'd ever know. "Fine, but I'm bringing the mug." They walked in silence toward the central dome, a structure that looked like someone had tried to make a government building out of leftover spaceship parts and disappointment. Inside, everything smelled faintly of recycled ozone and stress. He was led into a windowless room where 3 officials waited. One human, one Yalari, a species that resembled walking candle wax with eyes, and a diplomatic AI known as Modal 17, who had long since replaced all its empathy modules with spreadsheets. "Sergeant," said the human, a man with too much forehead and not enough sleep, "we've received several reports about your interaction with the Tarshian infant." "Let me guess," Elias said, dropping into the too small chair. "You're here to award me the Galactic Medal of Babysitting Excellence." Modal 17 beeped. "There is no such medal. Would you like to file a request to create one?" "No, but I'd like a patch, maybe a sash." "We have questions," the Yalari murmured, oozing concern onto the floor. Elias raised his mug. "Shoot." The human cleared his throat. "The baby exhibits neurosympathetic harmonization only in your presence. That's never been recorded between a human and a Tarshian. Do you understand what this means? That I'm the galaxy's weirdest nanny? That you may have triggered a psionic imprint, possibly a permanent one. That child might be bound to you." Elias blinked. "Bound? As in, like a duckling?" Modal 17 beeped again. "Ducks were an avian species from Earth. Their young exhibited imprinting behavior upon the first—" Yeah, thanks, Encyclopedia Robocop." The Yalari leaned forward. "This connection could be political or weaponized. Already whispers are spreading across the refugee network. Some believe you're part of a breeding experiment." Elias choked on his coffee. "I didn't breed anything. I didn't even— That's not—" He turned to the AI. "Modal, log this. I have never, under any circumstances, bred with a Tarshian." Modal 17 beeped. "Logged, though phrasing is suboptimal." The human ignored the interruption. "The baby's name is Eno, by the way." The mother finally spoke it. She also stated you are not to be reassigned. "I wasn't planning to be," Elias muttered. "The kid likes me. I like not being screamed at. It's a functional relationship." "The Alliance doesn't care about your feelings, Sergeant," the human snapped. "They care about what this means for interspecies diplomacy." "Which part?" Elias asked. "The soothing or the implied co-parenting with a bioluminescent single mother?" Silence answered him. Then Modal 17 said, "We have decided to keep you at the camp. Under observation, you will remain with the child." Elias stood. "Observation? What am I? A science fair project?" "Close enough," Tagrin said from the doorway, already tapping on a datapad. "You'll be assigned an escort, and your quarters will be moved next to the Tarshian sector. Congratulations, Sergeant. You've been promoted to Alien Comfort Unit. That better come with hazard pay. We'll give you a blanket." He paused. "Is it at least a warm blanket?" "No." Outside, Elias sighed and stared up at the smog-choked sky. Somewhere in the distance, a broken generator exploded with a very casual thump. He took another sip of his coffee, now bitter and cold. "Should have taken that assignment on the fungus moon," he muttered. Back at the tent, Eno reached out the moment Elias stepped inside. The baby's tiny fingers curled around his, warm and certain. Lucia gave him a long look. Not suspicious, not surprised, just resigned. "You came back." "I always come back," Elias said. "Apparently I'm part of the furniture now." Eno giggled, and Elias found himself smiling. "A little, just a little." The dreams had started 2 nights ago. Elias would close his eyes and suddenly find himself floating above a field of stars that blinked like bored traffic lights, listening to a song that wasn't quite a song, more like a memory trying to whistle. The stars sometimes turned into eyes. Once they turned into sandwiches. That was the night he'd fallen asleep, hungry. "Are you experiencing hallucinations?" asked Dr. Threx, not looking up from her data slate as Elias sat across from her in the med tent. I dreamt I was a sentient toaster making motivational speeches to scared bread, he said. So, maybe, she tapped her stylus harder. These are likely residual effects from prolonged psionic proximity. Your neural patterns are showing slight elevation in harmonic receptors. Which means? You're being rewired by baby cuddles. Good to know, Elias said. Should I be worried about developing a sudden interest in space poetry or, I don't know, levitating by accident? That depends, she said, finally meeting his gaze. Have you tried levitating yet? He blinked. You're joking. I haven't decided. When Elias got back to the tent, Lucia was sitting on a crate, her legs crossed and her expression set to cryptically silent. She'd been quiet ever since they'd moved quarters into the Tarshin sector, possibly because they now had a working heater, and silence was one of her few remaining luxuries. Guess what? Elias said, stepping in and gesturing to himself dramatically. Your child is turning me into a walking science anomaly, possibly also a small appliance. Lucia tilted her head. He pointed to Eno, who was currently chewing on a piece of synth blanket with the enthusiasm of a teething shark. Any chance this kid's psychic powers include dream manipulation? Because I'm starting to suspect he's trying to tell me something through interpretive weirdness. Lucia finally spoke. You saw the stars. Elias paused. Wait, you know about the stars? Not stars, memory. He's showing you what he sees, what he is. Okay, that is definitely above my pay grade, Elias muttered. I'm barely qualified to operate a coffee maker, let alone interpret the galactic subconscious of a half-alien toddler. Eno let out a joyful squeal and flung the synth blanket across the room, using what Elias could only assume was baby telekinesis. It stuck to the wall with a concerning sizzle. Great, Elias said. He's evolving. Next week he'll be opening wormholes with a sneeze. Outside, the camp loudspeaker clicked to life. All personnel, be advised. A diplomatic shuttle will arrive in 1 hour. Representatives of the Tarshin Assembly request a private audience regarding subject Eno. Lucia stiffened. Elias raised an eyebrow. Friends of yours? She didn't answer. An hour later, the Tarshin delegation arrived in a sleek skimmer shaped like a sideways harp. Everything about them screamed important. Their robes shimmered with encoded light. Their expressions were as unreadable as Harvey's humor algorithms, and their footsteps made no sound at all. They ignored Elias at first, gathering around Eno in a quiet circle, their bioluminescent skin flickering like cautious lanterns. Then one of them turned, a tall figure with silver markings across her cheeks. You are the human, she said. Technically, Elias replied. Also technically awake, though I could really use a nap. You have bonded with the child. I mean, we vibe. Mostly when I'm holding snacks, the others murmured. The tall one stepped closer. You do not understand what this means. I never do. That's kind of my brand. The woman didn't smile. Tarshin diplomats rarely did. It might be against their union charter. The child is unique, she said. A synthesis. One born not only of species, but of time and resonance. He is the first. Elias looked down at Eno, who was now trying to climb into a food crate headfirst. First what? He asked. She didn't answer. The next morning, a box appeared outside the tent. No note, no signature, just a plain alloy container with a blinking green dot. Inside was a blanket, not synthetic, not mass-produced, hand-woven, Tarshin thread and human cotton, and beneath it, a message stitched in multiple languages. Protect the bridge. Elias stared at it for a long moment. Then he sighed, picked up Eno, who giggled and drooled something faintly luminescent onto his shoulder, and muttered, Kid, if I'm the adult in this situation, we are so doomed. The first time someone tried to kidnap Eno, Elias was in the middle of losing a very one-sided argument with the food printer. I said pancakes, not pungent cake. What even is that? The machine hummed innocently and spat out something gray, steaming, and possibly sentient. Elias stared at it with the cautious respect one reserves for unexploded ordnance. That was when the alarm sounded. At first, he assumed it was another false positive, like last week, when a camp-wide lockdown had been triggered by a raccoon-like species trying to hotwire a vending unit. But when Harv E. chimed in with Arnie, unauthorized breach detected in Sector 4, Tent designation E9. Elias dropped the gray lump, grabbed his boots, and ran. He skidded into the tent to find chaos in progress. Lucia was on the ground, one arm shielding Eno, who was glowing like a tiny rave light. Three figures, humanoid, masked, and dressed in stealth mesh, were attempting to lift both mother and child into a compact anti-grav sling. "Excuse me," Elias said, grabbing the nearest attacker by the collar and yanking him sideways. "Do you have an appointment?" The assailant lunged at him with an electrodagger. Elias ducked, kicked, and made a mental note to start doing those daily stretches he always skipped. The second attacker swung a stun baton, which connected with Elias's shoulder and earned a curse that translated poorly in 14 languages. He responded by headbutting the guy, hard, and was mildly surprised when it worked. By the time the third one reached for Eno, the baby let out a high-pitched wail that sent every loose object in the tent flying backward. Elias watched as the final kidnapper hit the wall with a meaty thud and didn't get up. Lucia looked up, blinking. "Did he just—" "Yup," Elias groaned, rubbing his shoulder. "Baby's got a new trick. I'm putting that under unlicensed sonic defense system." Reinforcements arrived 6 minutes late and 3 suspects short. The 2 surviving assailants were already gone, and the third was muttering incoherently about the eyes, which didn't inspire much confidence. Later, while patching up his bruises in the medbay, Elias fielded questions from command, including the ever-popular, "Why do people keep targeting you?" "Because I'm warm, approachable, and look like I'd fall for a fake pizza delivery ploy," Elias replied, flexing his shoulder. "Also because there's a glowing baby with universe-bending potential who won't nap unless I'm nearby." Modal 17's response pinged in from a secure line. "Security clearance has been raised. You are now designated as Category Delta, Bonded Protector. Does that come with a pay bump? Number. But you do receive a complimentary tracking implant." Elias looked down at the small metal disc now attached to his wrist. "Awesome," he muttered. "I'm a babysitter with a barcode." Back at the tent, Eno was chewing on a piece of tactical cloth and gurgling with satisfaction. Lucia was pacing, her glow flickering erratically. "They knew where to go," she said. "They knew when you'd be gone. You think someone inside command sold us out? I think too many people want him, and too many systems fear what he is." "Great," Elias said, lifting Eno into his arms. "So he's a wanted psionic artifact now. That tracks." Eno giggled and promptly sneezed, right into Elias's face. The sneeze sparkled. Elias blinked. Did he just sneeze? In sparkles? "It's harmless," Lucia said. "You say that, but I taste colors now." That night, Elias stayed awake. Eno curled against his chest. He listened to the quiet hum of the camp, the buzz of 1,000 lives pretending things were normal. He thought about glowing blankets, cryptic warnings, and the fact that he had just fought off kidnappers with nothing but instinct, sarcasm, and a headbutt. Then he looked down at Eno, who was drooling happily onto his shirt. "You'd better grow up to save the galaxy, kid," Elias whispered, "because I'm out here getting sparkled on for free." The abandoned shipyards of Uroth Kel weren't on any official maps, which usually meant they were either extremely dangerous or extremely profitable. Elias had bet, incorrectly, that they'd be neither. The moment they landed, the ground groaned beneath them like an old man with joint complaints. Broken starships jutted from the soil at odd angles, hulls stripped of anything useful, leaving only rusted ribs and mystery smells. Elias wrinkled his nose. "Smells like disappointment and recycled air freshener." Lucia didn't respond. She was focused, eyes sharp, guiding Eno in a sling strapped to her chest. The baby was babbling to himself in tones that sounded suspiciously like Morse code. "You're sure this is the place?" Elias asked, stepping over the half-buried wing of something that once called itself a freighter and now mostly called itself tetanus. Lucia nodded. "This was where they started it. Project Lyrian." "Project Lyrian," Elias echoed. "Sounds like a bad indie band." She turned to him. "It was an initiative, started during the first psionic convergence. A joint experiment, Tarshian and human, illegal on both sides." "Oh, good," Elias said. "Illegal science projects. Just once I'd like to bond with a baby that doesn't have classified origins." They reached a collapsed corridor, a piece of ship torn in half, insides exposed like a dissected beast. Lucia climbed in without hesitation. Elias followed more cautiously, pausing only once to remove a small alien critter from his pant leg. It hissed. He hissed back. It fled. Inside, flickering panels still pulsed with dying energy. Lucia swept her hand over a console, whispering in her native tongue. Lights responded. A hologram blinked to life. Blurred figures, voices warped by age. Combining neurological echo patterns with dormant genetic carriers. Human subjects show potential. The image flickered, jumped forward. Resonance frequency reached stable harmonization. The hybrid prototype is viable. Another jump. One of the subjects escaped. He doesn't know. He can't know. Then silence. Elias stared at the projection. Please tell me that was referring to someone else. Lucia slowly turned to him. You were born on Vardis Station, yes? Yeah, it was a mining colony. It was also one of the collection sites. He blinked. You're saying I was... No. I'm just a guy with good reflexes and bad luck. You were one of the dormant carriers, Lucia said. Eno activated you. Elias ran a hand through his hair. So now I'm what? A walking psionic USB port? More like a catalyst, she said. Or a key. I always wanted to be a key, Elias muttered. For a vending machine, not a galactic science experiment. Eno gurgled happily in response, then emitted a tiny shock wave that sent a floating panel clattering to the floor. Oh, fantastic, Elias said, ducking. He's learning punctuation. A sudden hum filled the chamber. The lights changed color, bright violet pulsing in rhythm. Lucia's eyes widened. They found us. Elias didn't ask who. The who didn't matter. The fact that the floor was beginning to vibrate did. Exit plan? There's a tunnel beneath the wreckage, Lucia said, scooping up Eno and strapping him tighter. This way. They crawled through narrow corridors, dodging bursts of static and half-functional security bots that seemed more confused than hostile. One of them offered Elias a pamphlet for a defunct loyalty program before short-circuiting. Thanks, buddy, Elias said. I always wanted half-off fuel and a mild concussion. At last they emerged into open air, just in time to see a sleek skimmer descending in the distance. Not ours? Elias asked. Lucia shook her head. Definitely not. As they ran, Elias clutched Eno close. The baby laughed, sending out a pulse that briefly knocked 2 enemy drones from the sky. Okay, Elias panted. I take back what I said about pacifier training. This kid is awesome. Lucia smiled despite the tension. You were meant for this. I was meant for a desk job and cereal that doesn't glow. Behind them, the ruins of Uroth Kale pulsed once more, then went dark. Elias didn't look back. He was too busy planning how to outrun whatever legacy he'd apparently inherited, and maybe find better coffee. The plan, if one could generously call it that, involved a retired warlord, a stolen dread cruiser, and 3 crates of counterfeit diplomatic badges Elias had won in a poker game against a sentient fungus. It was, by all reasonable definitions, not a good plan. But it was the only one that didn't involve handing Eno over to a shadowy organization known for using phrases like biological leverage and acceptable losses. Are you absolutely sure he owes you a favor? Lucia asked as they huddled near a busted comms relay on the edge of Veneer orbit. Technically, yes, Elias said. He promised me one wish after I spared his dignity in an arm wrestling match. You broke his mechanical arm. Exactly, very dignified of me. The comms relay buzzed to life, and a face appeared on the cracked hollow screen, part metal, part smug. General Croth, ex-mercenary overlord of the Zenthra Reaches, now technically retired, but still wearing body armor like it was casual wear. Croth, buddy, Elias said. Miss me? I had food poisoning more pleasant than you, Vorn. What do you want? Elias grinned. A distraction, and your biggest, loudest ship. There was a long pause. Then Croth laughed. You're lucky I'm bored. Minutes later, the Iron Banter, a dread cruiser so unnecessarily large it had indoor gravity parks, dropped out of stealth orbit and began broadcasting fake emergency signals in every major galactic language. Somewhere on the surface, a group of smugglers threw a tea party in panic. Lucia adjusted the sling across her chest as they boarded their shuttle. Eno was humming softly, a sound that rattled the stabilizers. "We get in. Send the message. Get out," Elias said, sliding into the pilot's seat. "No heroics, no monologues, no sudden revelations about me being the chosen one of some prophecy. I'm allergic to destiny." The relay point hovered above them like a floating web of wires and mirrors, long abandoned by official channels but still plugged into half the sector's comms grid. The trick was sneaking in, overriding the encryption, and blasting a message to everyone who might care, and a few who definitely wouldn't. "Are you ready?" Lucia asked as the relay gates opened. "Number, but I've got a baby in my lap who can knock over satellites with a sneeze." So, confidence is growing. Inside the relay hub, everything crackled with residual energy. Elias opened a console the size of a coffin, jammed in a hacked drive, and began uploading. "Message composition window open," Harvey announced. Elias cleared his throat. "Recording. Attention Galaxy. If you're hearing this, then congratulations. You're probably more qualified to handle this than I am. There's a child, part human, part Tarshin, who's doing things that break science. He's not a weapon. He's not a threat. He's a star. And if you try to control him, silence him, or dissect him, I'll make sure the entire known universe knows exactly who you are." Lucia blinked. That was actually articulate. "I've been practicing on Eno. He gives great feedback, usually through light telekinetic slaps." The upload bar ticked toward completion. Elias held his breath. Then something beeped behind them. Cross voice crackled over the intercom. "You've got company. 2 fighters incoming. They're not mine, and they look very cranky." "Time to go," Elias muttered. They bolted for the shuttle. The first enemy fighter dropped a warning shot that narrowly missed their exhaust trail. Eno giggled. "Glad one of us is enjoying this," Elias said, hitting the thrusters. As they broke atmosphere, the relay behind them lit up, transmitting Elias's message across 6 sectors. Some people would laugh, some would panic, some would start making plans. But most importantly, they knew now. In the back seat, Eno reached for Elias's shoulder, eyes bright. Lucia looked over. "You didn't have to do that." "I really did," Elias said, "because this galaxy's got enough secrets. I figure a little loud truth might help." Eno sneezed again. Somewhere behind them, one of the pursuing ships spun out of control. "Okay," Elias added, "truth and a baby with laser lungs. We're gonna be fine." The summit was held in the orbiting rings of Vanir. Neutral territory with artificial gravity, 12 snack dispensers per hall, and enough political tension to melt steel. Elias stood near a transparent wall, sipping lukewarm stem tea from a paper cup that kept disintegrating at the rim. "I think this cup's trying to assassinate me," he muttered. Lucia adjusted the formal drape across her shoulder. Eno sat on her hip, chewing meditatively on a diplomatic pass. It was unclear whether that was a violation of galactic protocol or just impressive multitasking. "You don't have to speak," she said softly. "There are ambassadors, translators, peace architects." "I know," Elias said, "but none of them got slapped in the face by a psionic tantrum or headbutted a kidnapper in a broken cafeteria." The central forum was already buzzing. 27 species in attendance, each seated behind shimmering translation shields, blinking in every color and emotional wavelength imaginable. The Keldari glowed nervously. The Trin delegates kept rearranging their limbs out of habit. The human ambassador was reading from a datapad and mouthing the words like he didn't trust them. Elias stepped into the center. "Hi," he said. "I'm Sergeant Elias Vorn. I didn't come here as a diplomat, or a representative, or even someone with an advanced degree. I came here because a baby wouldn't stop screaming." There was a pause. A few delegates exchanged looks. One scribbled something. "Let me rephrase that," Elias continued. "I came because I accidentally became the calming blanket for a child who's a genetic first. Eno," he gestured toward the gurgling bundle in Lucia's arms, "isn't just human. He isn't just Tarshin. He's a result of something bigger, something that scared people. A hybrid, a bridge." He paced slowly, trying not to trip on the anti-static carpeting. People tried to take him, use him, hide him. But here's the thing. He's not dangerous because of what he is. He's important because of what he makes us ask. If a child can connect minds across species, maybe we should stop being so proud of our boundaries. One of the Yalari raised a pseudopod and blinked slowly, which Elias hoped meant keep going. He cleared his throat. I'm not here to say he belongs to any one group. He belongs to all of us. And he needs all of us to stop acting like scared bureaucrats with shiny badges and start acting like grown-ups. The kid sneezes and disrupts drone frequencies. Imagine what he could do on purpose. Imagine what he might build one day. He paused. And maybe we should think less about who's in control and more about who's willing to care. The chamber was quiet. Then one by one, shields began to lower. Small gestures. The Keldari tapped the accept glyph on their console. The Trin blinked twice, the sign of non-hostile acknowledgement. The human ambassador dropped his datapad in surprise and knocked over his drink. That, Elias figured, was a pretty standard Earth reaction. Later, outside the chamber, Elias sank onto a bench with a sigh of someone who'd just dodged another galactic incident. Lucia sat beside him. You did well, she said. I didn't explode or faint. That's basically excellence. Eno clambered into his lap and promptly fell asleep with a heroic snore. Elias looked down at him. He's gonna change everything, isn't he? Lucia nodded. So will you. Elias stared at her. That was suspiciously profound. Who are you? I'm a mother, she said, and your family. A silence passed between them. It wasn't heavy, just warm. Croft's voice buzzed over a comm. By the way, I stole 3 of the buffet platters. You want in? Elias grinned. Absolutely. The next day, as the camp disassembled and new plans took shape, Elias sat on the edge of a loading bay. Eno crawled in circles, babbling, occasionally causing a hovering wrench to levitate and hit someone. Elias sipped his coffee. It was still bad, but not as bad. I'm not who I was, he said aloud, mostly to himself. He was still sarcastic, still tired, still confused most days. But he was also part of something now. Not a mission, not a chain of command, a beginning. Eno yawned, flopped onto his back, and pointed at the stars above. Elias looked up with him. I see it too, kid, he whispered. Whatever comes next, we're ready.